The modern hero, the modern individual who dares to heed the call and seek out that mansion with which it is our whole destiny to be atoned, cannot, indeed must not, wait for society to cast off its slough of pride, fear, rationalized avarice, and sanctified misunderstanding. Live, says Nietzsche, as though the day were here. It is not society that is to guide and save the creative hero, but precisely the reverse. And so every one of us shares in the supreme ordeal, carries the cross of the Redeemer, not in the bright moments of his tribe's great victories, but in the silences of his personal despair. This is the Depth Mystic Community Podcast, episode 22. And with me, as always, is my guest and co-host, Jungian Depth Mystic, Zach Tollen. Hello. So that opening quote was the last paragraph from Joseph Campbell's book, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. This week, we're touching on going it alone. I don't really know even how to talk about this subject matter because, on the one hand, it's fascinating and essential, but on the other hand, there's something sad and scary about it. Well, I guess you just have to try. That quote that you had me read was essential to my journey. Because when I was 19 years old and I discovered Joseph Campbell, he gave me a way out from the trap that I was in. I was stuck as a teenager in society who didn't know how to live or what to expect from his own future. And then discovering Joseph Campbell, it gave me a form of identity. But it also warned me that the hero's journey would have to be taken by myself. That I would have to learn to go inward and to trust my own mind at critical moments, rather than trusting society. Yes, and wasn't there a poem that you wrote at that same time that somehow allowed you to confront and make peace with that inner self? Yes, actually, in that same course, when I discovered Joseph Campbell, the teacher said that there was a poetry contest. And I don't think of myself as a poet most of the time, but I was so inspired by Joseph Campbell that I wrote for that contest. And I ended up winning $1,000. Wait, what contest is this? You won $1,000 and you don't even think you're a poet? Yeah, it was my local community college. For whatever reason, some wealthy donor had created a fund that would reward the writer of the best poem that year with a prize. It was kind of lucky because it got me to write that poem, and this poem is another example of the psychology that I was going through at that time. So I wanted you to read that poem too. And maybe we can tie it into this theme of what it means to go it alone. Okay. Serpent in My Bedroom by Zach Tollen. Note, at this time I was not yet Jungian Depth Mystic Zach Tollen. There's a serpent in my bedroom, meeting gaze with me. Coiled silence in the corner, cold anxiety. In troubled hope I turn away, but comfort far from comes. With perfect eyes he pierces through. My very heart he numbs. My mind sees all his smooth dark scales, hears hissing tongue's foul note. I feel the form of fear itself wrapping round my throat. On turning back, he hasn't moved. He waits for my reply. And then with solemn stance I swear, by you I will not die. For I will choose to meet this snake, but not with shield or lance. With happy stride I'll hail to him, and I intend to dance. So that poem is like a really short summary of how I experienced Joseph Campbell talking about the hero's journey. But he was addressing the major concern that would rear itself time and again, which was, how do you deal with being alone? How do you interpret the fact that very often you are left alone to figure out what to do? And I guess one of the key insights is that society doesn't really know what it's doing. On the surface, society appears functional. And we're able to accomplish so many amazing things. Planes, trains, and automobiles. And nowadays, cell phones, computers, chemistry. The amount of technological achievements is mind-blowing. But that hides a weakness in our civilization, and maybe in all human civilizations. It's a kind of shortcoming that has not yet been solved. And the idea is that we don't know what the meaning of life actually is. And I definitely needed to discover Joseph Campbell in order to be able to separate, on the one hand, the amazingness of our civilization from these shortcomings, which are not obvious right away. Nobody really knows what we're here for. And Joseph Campbell says, each one of us shares in the supreme ordeal, carries the cross of the Redeemer, not in the bright moments of his tribe's great victories, but in the silences of his personal despair. And I guess this serpent is a symbol for me, and it's always been a similar symbol for almost everyone. Even cultures that are not part of our civilization have experienced the serpent as a similar symbol, which I would call the separation of consciousness from the group or animal-based society, the mammal-based society. I have this dichotomy I call monkey brain and snake brain. Our normal mode is social. So we have monkey brain, and we're scared and fascinated by snakes. And snakes have a totally different kind of brain. And so going it alone kind of requires you to become familiar with snake brain, is how I would say it. Wow, that's pretty fascinating. I mean, you're talking about the snake, and I don't know if people will understand immediately what you mean by snake brain. But I can sort of understand what you mean by monkey brain. Because people do care primarily about their own position within the tribe of monkeys that they belong to. Most of human motivation is just the desire to position yourself in a higher or more prestigious place within the tribe of monkeys that you think you belong to. Is that what you mean? Yes, unfortunately, I agree with that. Maybe not everybody has awakened to that reality. But we've all seen nature documentaries, and we've seen not just monkeys, but social animals in general, but monkeys and chimpanzees and bonobos in particular. So much of their energy is invested in their tribal relationships. their social status. And it's almost impossible to ignore if you are honest with yourself when you look at human beings, that human beings participate in that same motivational foundation. But we are different in the sense that we also have a part of us that's like a snake. We have the ability to encounter the snake. Wow, okay, that's really interesting. But what do you mean? I mean, aren't we just normal mammals like regular monkeys or dogs or something? Aren't snakes cold-blooded and just totally different from us? Why do you think we have a part of us that's like a snake? I guess it's certainly possible to debate my point. And you can question whether the snake serves as the proper symbol for what I'm getting at. But I should point out that Aristotle called mankind the rational animal. It's the strange fact that we possess reason, which differentiates us from every other animal. Wait, so you're saying the snake has something to do with man's possession of reason, like the rational animal? Kind of. For example, if you look in the myth of the Garden of Eden, mankind is basically not very conscious of himself. He's kind of like a tribe of monkeys. You know, he has Eve, but his overall behavior is similar to what we imagine animals in the jungle behave like. And then the snake comes to him and says, well, don't eat from the tree or you'll become like the gods. And then they eat from the tree and they become like the gods. They have consciousness. They become aware. And in that story, the awareness they have is the knowledge of good and evil. But you could extend it and say they just have knowledge of everything. Like if you just know enough, things become complicated. The thing mankind achieved, whether it was through a kind of fairy tale like the Garden of Eden or some biological evolutionary process, which modern science would conform to, at some point, mankind acquired this capacity for reason. Okay, and you're saying this reason somehow gives him the ability to be different from just like a tribal mammal that's always just seeking social status? Yeah, that's kind of what I'm getting at. Once man acquired the part of the brain that is symbolized by the serpent, he's able to step outside of the ordinary biological framework and get more or less objective perspective on himself and on the world. In other words, he can see objectively, apart from social status. I think I know what you're getting at. I think what you're saying is this is like a huge conflict between the normal motivations of the animal that for millions of years have allowed monkeys and all different other animals that use groups to survive. And then this new additional thing that human beings have. Yes, that's what I'm saying. But the issue is that in order to gain true access to your serpent brain, to your true reason, you have to become aware of the degree to which your tribe, your group of monkeys, has a conformist mentality and is trying to sort of steer you away from using your reason. And if you don't acquire that insight, then you won't be able to undergo the journey. And also, I think what you're saying is that there's going to be loneliness involved here. Otherwise, you wouldn't have had to fortify yourself with that quote from Joseph Campbell. You know, the modern hero carries the cross of the Redeemer, not in the bright moments of his tribe's great victories, but in the silences of his personal despair. Well, yeah, that quote resonated with me so powerfully. It read like religious scripture. And it just means that a courageous and intelligent human being carries within him the power to separate himself from the collective opinion. But moreover, that the collective cannot survive long term without people's willingness to do that. The collective requires people to separate themselves from the collective in order to guide and save the collective. I found that thought endlessly profound and essential, because there was so much welling up within me at that time, so many sort of independent thoughts that in order for me to go ahead and think them, I would have to have an excuse. I would have to be able to tell my monkey brain that I was still a good person, even though I was having these thoughts. Joseph Campbell gave me the way to do that. And I still think what he's saying is true. I think people's primary survival mechanism is to belong to the group. We are very similar to all the other social animals for whom group survival is essential. But we also have this other thing, which is to say we need contact with the truth, with actual objective reality. And the only way to get access to the truth is to follow the call of the hero's journey. And then you have to endure being alone. All these moments where your instinct is to reach out and to ask for guidance, to have somebody tell you what the right thing to do is, only to realize that there aren't enough people who are thinking about the stuff that you're thinking about. There's no one available. Well, yeah, that's pretty deep. And I'm thinking about what gives you the power to become convinced that this is the way to go. Because you're becoming essentially a heretic. You're violating the collective consensus. And I'm wondering how you get the confidence to do that. There is a school of thought that appears in a lot of different places, having to do with if you believe it to be so, then it becomes so. You have to believe. And it has a powerful energy about it. It's like there are some zones of reality wherein what the person thinks about the situation becomes the reality of the situation. Now, I tend not to go overboard with this because it's a little bit ridiculous to assume that that's true everywhere. I mean, there is a reality outside of people, and it doesn't change just because people's thoughts change. But in some cases, there is a huge shift that is required in the mind. For example, Christianity introduces this thought when it says, God so loved the world that he gave his only son that whoever would believe would have eternal life. And I don't know what the history of that thought before Christianity was. The idea that your choice to believe is the thing that makes the difference. Okay, that whole thing about belief is pretty tricky. I've always thought that it's a little weird because when you believe, are you really choosing to believe, or are you merely arriving at the point where you believe, but not because you decided to? Because isn't the choice to believe the result of already believing? Don't you have to already believe in order to choose to believe? I agree. That is a tricky question. And I think I have some opinions about that, but I don't necessarily want to go into that in detail. The more important point that I'm trying to illustrate is that there is a moment of conversion. There's a moment when before you were skeptical and you didn't necessarily believe, but then something made you switch sides. You've become traitor, as it were, to your original belief system. I actually would like to explore much further all of the specific things that made me become a traitor to my original conformity. But I think that will take a while. And all I can say for now is there is a point at which the new message, the message that you have to rely on your reason and not on society, in me, acquired a level of force that tipped the balance. And then once I started believing, I was willing to sort of let go of all my prior attachments. It's like, okay, let's stop pretending that I belong to this tribe of monkeys. Let's stop doing the things that I've been doing in order to show that I'm one of them. Let's take some risks. That's really interesting. Can we also go back to that poem and talk about the little twist you had with your Serpent in Your Bedroom poem? Like in the last stanza, you said, "You will choose to meet the snake, but not with shield or lance. With happy stride, you'll hail to him, and you intend to dance." What's that about? Joseph Campbell was really influential there. Obviously, if you have a shield and a lance, then you're a knight in shining armor, going in like St. George to defeat the dragon. But somehow the part of me that was calling me to the adventure did not want to just defeat the dragon outright. That might be something like a legacy of Christianity, where the devil is cast down from heaven and he becomes the eternal antagonist, and Christianity calls upon its heroes to defeat the devil in whatever form it takes. Sometimes it takes the form of a serpent or a transformed serpent, such as the dragon. But I guess I didn't think that that was totally appropriate. Think about the machines that we use. The machines are kind of like our shield and our lance. And if you look at modern science fiction, the main, most powerful theme is like the devastating effects that machines have on people. That's true in Star Wars, where Darth Vader is more machine than man. And in The Terminator, where the machines take over the world entirely, which is also in The Matrix. And so I guess maybe in my head I was thinking, well, the shield and the lance is the obvious form of combat. It is consciousness. It is your conscious understanding of how you defeat enemies. And I wasn't totally willing to think of the snake as an enemy either. So I'm putting aside my shield and lance. And moreover, I'm not willing to think of the snake as it presented itself to me originally as an enemy. And nowadays, I associate it with rationality and consciousness. I'm sort of on the snake side. You say you're on the snake side. Well, don't you think people born in a Christian society who are taught about the wiles of the serpent in the garden and of all the things Satan does and who feel like Satan is the bad guy, don't you think the people in this society are going to have a problem with you allying yourself with the snake? Yeah, they will. They will, because Christians, they're not Taoists. Imagine like a yin and a yang, a white and a black. Or like in Star Wars, you have the Force. You have the dark side and the light side. Christians believe that the light side is the only side you should pay attention to, and the dark side should be repelled or it should go unacknowledged. And that's the complaint Carl Jung put forth about Christianity in general. His whole life's work was an attempt to sort of redeem Christianity from its one-sidedness. And I think his life's work was successful. I think Jung redeemed Christianity from its one-sidedness. History will tell if in several hundred years people still think what I think. But about the serpent, just in case people are wondering whether it's okay to be allied with the serpent, there's one part of the New Testament that puts a little twist in the traditional Christian hatred of the serpent. Because Jesus himself says, "Behold, I cast you out as a sheep among wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and innocent as doves." So not even Jesus can escape the fact that the serpent is a complicated thing. It has a multi-dimensional nature, one of which involves the height of wisdom. But for me, the snake is increasingly just coming to represent the ability to step outside of society and exist in objective awareness of reality. Like to actually see reality for what it is without regard to how you stand or how the people of your tribe stand with respect to their hierarchical ranking with each other. That is a really interesting thing to point out about the Jesus quote. The devil is associated with the serpent, and the devil is the enemy in Christianity. And yet Jesus says you have to be wise as serpents. So not even Jesus can escape the entanglement, the sort of Taoist yin-yang, where the white has a little bit of black in it and the black has a little bit of white in it. Not even Jesus can escape that. Exactly. And I don't think the black is all bad. As I say, I'm pretty much praising snake brain. You know, the rational animal. It's the one animal that has the ability to really see reality for what it is, apart from any of the instinctive drives that compel it in a biological way. But again, to get there, you have to endure loneliness. Loneliness is a part of arriving at the true power of your serpent brain. To get serpent brain means to get outside society, to stop paying attention to what people are going to approve of and the things that you have to do in order to get people to agree with you. And so you need some sort of belief pattern that allows you to endure that. You have to be able to conceptualize yourself as somebody who's capable of stepping outside of conformity and surviving. When you first do it, it feels like you might not survive. It's extremely risky. But the more you do it, the more you understand the actual nature of the situation, of actual reality. And you become friends with reality. So it gets easier. Again, just to review, the belief. There's a moment of belief. There is some kind of moment where the person telling you about the snake and about serpent brain, there's a moment where somebody like Joseph Campbell or Carl Jung comes along and you start believing them more than you believed all the other stuff that got you to that moment. And then along with that belief comes this power of resolve. And that allows you to get through all those moments when there's literally nobody else to talk to. You have yourself to talk to, basically. You have all the different parts of yourself, but you don't have an outside source to rely on. It is possible to get that foundation that allows you to undergo the actual journey of the hero. And those moments of loneliness are just inevitable. I think that's enough for this week. I didn't really know how to bring up this topic because it's somewhat scary and sad, but I know that it's a part of your life. It's like an essential part of your journey to have to confront this issue. Well, yeah, I'm glad we were able to bring it up and talk about it. That's the Depth Mystic Community Podcast, episode 22. You can leave a comment in one of the discussion groups, and we will see you next week.